is to make you understand in the most simplest way. But if you go through books, it is confusing. So let me give you my practical approach. How do I approach on selecting this thema exchanges? Very, very, very important. Okay. Now, basically, as I said, only three: fixed tube, U-tube, and floating head. So what is fixed tube? Fixed tube exchangers, you have the tube sheet. The tube sheet are fixed to the shell. So this is called as fixed tube exchangers. So this is the most economical exchanger, very, very cost effective exchangers, and it has some own limitations also. So you cannot use fouling fluid in the shell side. Remember, whenever you are using this fixed tube exchanger, your fouling fluid, we cannot use the shell side as a fouling fluid. So if the shell side is a clean fluid, we can use fixed tube. Also, the temperature limitation is also important because the tubes are fixed, so there is no expansion is happening. So if the difference in the shell side and the tube side less than 93 degrees, again it is recommendation, not standard, recommendation. If it is more than 93 degrees Celsius, this is sometimes companies like Dow, DuPont, Shell, they have different values. This is one of the company's value. This is 93 degrees Celsius. So if the temperature difference in the shell side and the tube side is less than 93 degrees Celsius, we can use this. If it is more than, we cannot use it. Clear? So this is tube side. This is the most economical, low cost. If the shell side is fouling, we cannot use it. So this is fixed tube sheet exchanger. Now we are going to see another type of exchanger, which is called as U-tube heat exchanger. So what is U-tube? So here there is only one fixed tube, and there is no sheet. Okay, the same tube is bent. So there is only one tube sheet. And the advantage of this U-tube is you can remove the bundle. If you remove the bundle, what is the advantage? We can clean the shell. So shell can be cleaned. So in the first case, we cannot clean the shell because it is fixed tube. So in this case, that one problem is eliminated. The bundle, remove this rear end, take it out, and the bundle can be pulled out. Once the bundle is pulled out, the inside shell can be cleaned, right? So it is used for high temperature difference because in the first set, you said the temperature difference, if it is more than 93, we cannot use it. If it is less than 93, we can use it. So in this case, more than 93, we can use it because you have an expansion. The tube can expand in the U-bend. Clear? Now, clean service. Now the problem here. Here, the first problem there, shell, you cannot use fouling in the shell side, right? Here, you cannot use it in the tube side because the tube, the material can foul here and it can plug. So tube side fluid, if it is a dirty fluid, we cannot use it. Now the question comes, what is dirty fluid? Dirty fluid, again, I'm going to give you a recommendation. If your fouling factor is more than 0.0004 meter square centigrade per watt, then that is called as dirty fluid. Okay, anything more than 0.0004, 304. Anything more than that, it's a dirty fluid. We don't recommend to use it in the tube side. So then the U-bend. So this is one limitation. There is another limitation is also there. When there is a high velocity, you can have erosion on the U-bends. So these are the two limitations, right? So when you have high velocity going through this tube, you may have some erosion and your tube can break. So these are the two limitations. Now you have super duper exchanger. This is excellent exchanger. So this is called as floating head exchanger. Very, very expensive. Generally, you will see very common in a petrochemical industries and refineries. This is very common, but this is very, very expensive exchanger. Now, if you see here, you have a head. You can see my mouse. you can see there is a head, right? This head is always floating in the with the shell. So there is an expansion is happening. So if there is more than 93 degrees Celsius, the difference between the hot and cold is more than 93 degrees Celsius, easily we can use it. Again, I want to clean the shell side. You open the bonnet, take it out, pull the tubes. Tubes can be pulled it out and can be cleaned. Now I want to clean the tube. You open this, the tubes are exposed. You can hydrojet or you can do chemical cleaning. So this is excellent exchangers in terms of everything. Clear? But it is expensive. Floating head. So one tube sheet floats in the shell bundle, may be removable in the shell okay, I'll explain you everything in detail. So this is best suited for the shell and tube, for high difference in shell and tube. Cleaning is possible. Both the sides cleanings are possible. Again, you have some gaskets that offer leakage danger, but again, we have a lot of exchangers. I'll tell you, next slides you will understand. There are exchangers called S and T type of exchangers where we avoid these issues, but it is more expensive. Yeah, the biggest limitation is this is only horizontal. This is the limitation. Okay. Now, when you see the main purpose of this slide is when you go to industries, you will see exchanger, you will see these numbers. There is a stamp, exchanger, they will have a stamp. So when you see something like this, the first stamp 23 means it is shell ID. The second thing you will have some numbers. That number means the length of the tube. Okay. Then the last three numbers is A, E, S. Okay. The last three letters represents the type of exchanger. TEMA classification. Okay. What is TEMA classification? So when you go to the industry, remember first thing that you see in the number is ID, then the length, then the TEMA classification. So TEMA classification, I'm going to explain you in detail. Please listen. This is little bit complicated and this is going to drastically affect your selection of your heat exchanger. Now this is TEMA classification. So what TEMA classification? Front end, shell and rear end. So TEMA always says exchangers are classified into three. That is A, that is the front end. This is called a shell and this is rear. So let us go one by one. The front end, you have A, B, C, N and D. And the rear end, you have L, M, N, P, all these are rear end. Please listen. As I said, the first point, fixed tube exchangers. So whenever you see the last letter L, M, N. So in a heat exchanger, when you see the last letter as L, M, N, it is called fixed tube. Simple. So fixed tube means L, M, N. So when you see the last letter L, M, N, it is fixed tube. Then the last letter is U. If it is last letter is U, it is called as U2 exchangers, as I said, right? There are three. So the first three is fixed, this is U. Then the last one, what I said is floating head exchangers, right? So the last letter, if you see W, T, S, P. So when you see these numbers, it is called as floating head. So the exchangers, the exchangers are classified based on your rear end. First important thing, only based on the rear end, exchangers are classified. Clear? Now, when I will use all these things. So, okay, this is rear end. I will explain you. This is the front end. The front end, you have A, B, C, N, and D. So the A and L are same. Okay, you have a bonnet, you have a channel, and you have a flange here. The advantage of this over this is if I want to pull my exchanger, I can remove this flange. I can remove this flange, I can remove this pass partition, and I can pull my tubes. I can pull my tubes. So this is the advantage. So if you go for the B, there is no such thing. So I need to dislocate I need to remove my inlet and outlet flanges, pipeline has to be removed. Just imagine, okay. Then I need to remove this entire bonnet. Then I need to pull out this exchanger, right? So C, again, same thing. Only thing in C is you have in the channel itself, the tube is fixed. So where you use C, C is used when your pressure is more than 100 bar. Remember, when you're operating at high pressure, we have to use C. Then if you are using more than 150 bar, then you have to use a special type of design called as D exchanger. So when you see D exchanger, generally the pressure is more than 150 bar, which is very, very, very abnormal in a refinery or a petrochemical plants. In a polymer plants, you may see to some extent, but very difficult to see the operating pressure more than that. So the most common is A and B. So this is the shell. I will explain you later. Now, the fixed tube A, E, M. So when you have a fixed tube, can be A, E, L or A, E, M. The people make a mistake generally. See here, the tube sheet are fixed. So if you want to remove my bundle from here, I need to remove this entire, I cannot remove this flange. So if you use A, E, M, it will work, no doubt. But the most economical, whenever you see M type, bonnet type, recommended is B type, is most recommended. Doesn't mean that A type will work. A type will definitely work, but A type is costly. Remember, A type is costly. Why? Because you have additional flange. Why I have? Because I'm a little bit worried, because if I start telling more, you will start confusing. So I want to tell you in the most easiest way. A type is costly than B because A type has a flange. B type you don't have flange, so B type is very cheap. But the problem with both the type is A type, B type. I need to shut down my plant. Both the case you have to shut down. But the problem is you need to remove the inlet and outlet lines. You need to remove the entire bonnet. Whereas the A, you need to only remove this. But when you use this type of exchangers, bonnet, you have no choice. The shell is attached. You need to remove everything. So it doesn't make any sense of having A. So that is why I'm saying you have, whenever you see M, it is recommended to have B. BEM is more recommended. So when you have a removable bundle, okay, like this U-tube, you can use A. So AEU is one of the recommended when you have a U-tube bundles. Why? Because I want to remove it. I can no need to remove my inlet and outlet flanges. I can remove the this flange and I can pull the tubes. I can pull out the tubes. So whenever you think, wherever I can pull out the tubes, tube pulling the A is most advisable. So when you can pull out your tubes, A is most advisable. Then sometimes industries go for B because they may say that the fluid is clean and I don't need to pull out tubes very frequently, but this is my cost effective. So in that case, they will go for B. Now, this is what the shell, the front end. The rear end, as I said, the best is in the refineries or the petrochemicals, you always see floating head. The floating head, the most cheapest exchanger among the floating head is W. So whenever you see W as the last letter, that means it is very cheap exchanger. But the problem with the W is there is leakage stream. It can be, it has gaskets and it will leak. And whenever you see W, these W exchangers will not have hydrocarbons. maybe water, or maybe non-flammable liquids, non-toxic liquids generally, and those liquids need to expand when we need to go for this type of exchanges. So that again, this is used mainly for the not toxic, not for the flammable. W. Then comes P. P is slightly better. Again, we generally don't recommend P. P will be used for oils like lube oils, and which is not that much toxic or that much flammable. We can use P type of exchanges. So P is little bit costlier than W in the floating head conditions. Then comes S. S is most preferable. High toxic chemicals, high flammable chemicals, we will be using only S. So whenever you see S, remember this is very costly. At the same time, this will be used for it's a floating head, and it will maybe the chemicals will be hazardous or flammable chemicals. Much better than S is T. T is much better than S, but it's very costly because you need to have a bigger diameter. So the advantage of S and T, the T is you can easily pull out. When you want to pull it out very frequently, when there is more cleaning is required, then the T exchanger is preferred. But again, cost wise, it is expensive than S. So you mostly, if you see in a refinery, you will see S type. Okay. Now let us think about the shell. Shell is E, very common, very preferred. And if you have a temperature cross, what is temperature cross? Temperature cross is your cooling water outlet temperature, more outlet, if it is more than the not cooling water, the cooling medium temperature is more than the outlet. The cooling medium outlet temperature is more than the outlet temperature of the hot medium. Then it is called as temperature cross. So when we have a temperature cross, you need to have a counter current exchanger, and F is preferred. F is a true counter current exchanger. That is where the F we will go. So G, where we will go G? Whenever you size a thermosiphon, horizontal thermosiphon reboiler. See, whatever I'm saying is not standard. It is rule of thumb. When you make mistake, you will end up in designing wrong exchangers. So whenever you designing a thermosiphon reboiler, horizontal type of thermosiphon reboiler, you will go for G type. So this is the first preference. You type G type of shell, you will take thermosiphon, horizontal type of thermosiphon reboiler. And if the pressure drop is more, then the next better option is you go for H type. Okay, so H type and G type is thermosiphon horizontal. I'm telling about horizontal. Then J type. So there is another type called a J type. So J type is when there is more pressure drop than E, the shell side pressure drop. The E is first, the mostly preferred is E shell. If the pressure drop in the shell side is more than E shell, then the next option is J shell. Okay, another is K type. K type is again a reboiler where you need to have a complete boiling of your liquid, complete 100% boiling, wherever you are having that, expecting that, then you need to have an expansion. You need to have a proper separation between vapor and liquid. So that is how you have a kettle at the top of this. So that is where you are having a kettle. This is called as K-type exchanger. Then the cross-flow exchanger. Cross-flow exchanger is mainly used even after J-type. If the pressure drop is much more, then you need to go for a cross-flow exchanger X, which is little very rare. Very rare. So this is how the exchanger classification. So again, this has to come with lot of experience. When you design more exchangers, you will come to know more and more on this. So I tried to make you understand the most simplest way. So remember where to use B, where to use A, where to use C. The C is high pressure, more than 100 bar. N, okay, I didn't talk about N, right? N is the most cheapest exchanger. Everything is fixed. Whenever you see N, then the rear end can be N only. N will be N, N-E-N, always. Okay, this is the most cheapest exchanger. Once you fit it, shell side, tube side, everything should be clean. Then only you go for N type of exchangers, okay? So Normally, it is practically one of your chemical. If you use cooling water is a fouling chemical, fouling fluid. So, in process industries, very rarely you will see any in type of exchangers. So again, where your chemicals, where you are using your hot stream and cold stream, but is not fouling, and at the same time you should not have more temperature difference because these are all fixed. N is fixed tube. So the fixed tube means you don't have a temperature difference. If the temperature difference is more than 93, we cannot use it. So those conditions, NEN can be used, and NEN is the most cheapest exchanger. Now, very, very, very interesting topic. Yesterday, people were asking these questions. Allocation of fluid. Where I will allocate shell side and tube side, where I have to allocate my fluid. So, lot of parameters need to be considered. Temperature, pressure drop, viscosity, fouling and cleaning, corrosion, temperature range. The real problem is many parameters contradict to each other. Okay, many parameters will contradict to each other. Why I am saying is, let us go one by one. Higher temperature. Remember, when there is a high temperature, you need higher MOC to be made. So when you go for a costlier MOC, the best preferred is shell or a tube. Always tube. Because remember, a good designer has to design an exchanger which should be economical. So whenever you see a very high temperature exchangers, generally those fluids that stream, those process streams will be generally sent in the tube side. Because you have tube sides of fewer components, that is why I am sending it to the tube side. Now pressure, same thing, pressure. What happens when there is when I have a high pressure fluid? If I want to send a high pressure fluid, I need to have more thickness. So it is better to have more thickness in the shell side or tube side. Always tube side, right? So tube side you can have more thickness, but if you send the high pressure fluid in the shell side, the shell has to be made more thick. At the same time, the fluid is exposed, the tubes is also exposing. So tubes also will have some impact on this. So generally, always recommended when you have very high pressure fluids, we will send it to the tube side. Again, remember, this is the rule of thumb. Tube can withstand higher internal pressure than shell. This is one of the main reasons that the tube side fluids, we are sending it, the high pressure fluids, we are sending it to the tubes. Now, pressure drop. Pressure drop. Okay, just assume you take one glass of oil and one glass of water. Just pour it down. When you pour it down, which will flow fast? Oil or water? Just think it is water will flow fast. Why? The friction is very less, right? So the pressure drop of water is less. When there is more viscous, you have more pressure drop. Okay, so that is why always remember when there is a viscous fluid, if you send it in the tube, already the tubes, the areas are small, you will have more pressure drop. So when the fluid is viscous, it is recommended to send those fluid in the shell side. Clear? So when there is a fluid is viscous, shell side. When the temperature is high, tube side. When the pressure is high, tube side. Now comes the real villain actually. Dirtier fluid. Dirtier fluid preferably routed in the tube side. Because shell side, there could be some dead spaces are there in the shell side, and these accumulate, the dirts can accumulate in these dead spaces. So that is why it is always advisable to send the dirtier fluid in the tube side. Unfortunately, the dirtier streams are invariably viscous. This is where the problem really comes. The viscous fluid need to be sent in the shell side, but generally the dirtier fluid will come in terms of tube. We have to send it in the tube side. So there is a contradiction, right? So there is a contradiction. So what we will do? So this is where the engineer has to do some economics. You have to find out. Now I am going to tell you another question to you. The viscous fluid, as I said, going to be shell side, and the dirtier fluid in the tube side. Now, if the dirtier fluid is viscous, and you want to know, you are going to say that, okay, I want to clean my shell. I want to clean my tubes. Tube cleaning is much easier than shell. So either even though it is viscous, you decided to send it in the tube. You decided to send it in the tube. And what you are going to say, Anup, I'm going to increase the pump pressure. Okay, why I am not sending it in the viscous fluid in the shell side? Because the pressure drop is more, right? So you are saying that I'm going to increase the pump head. I'm going to increase the pump head, then I will have more pressure, then I can push this viscous fluid in the tube side because it is dirty, right? So you decided like that. Then you thought, oh my God, my other medium is very high pressure. So pressure fluid has to be sent in the tube side because tube can handle high internal pressure. That means again you need to do, what I should do. So this is how the engineer has to think about, you see the economics. Okay, how much thickness I have to make it. So if I'm going to send my high pressure fluid in the shell side, how much shell thickness is going to increase it? Okay, and if fine, if that is economical, or sending the dirty fluid in the shell side, and I may need to clean frequently. The plant has to shut down frequently, then I need to clean it. So you need to do some balance in that. So the right people, when you discuss all these things, is the licensor. So these type of discussion will happen in the basic engineering. When you do, that is what my classes, you will have some licensor discussion will be there along with operations. Then they will finalize when you have these issues, economic wise. Because when you compromise on economics, you need to do some compromise on your operations. So you need to do some trade-off. So how to do this trade-off? Not only you need to involve your higher peoples, like technology peoples need to be involved and discuss this type of issues. Clear? So that is why I said it is not straightforward. Yesterday somebody was asking, can I send always dirty fluid in the tube side? Yeah, this is the guidelines. But finally, when you come across these type of contradictions, it is not only your decision. You need to discuss with your tech center, technology people, and there will be MANREP. MANREP means manufacturing representative from the technology. So those people, you have to involve them, and you need to do where you have to do this trade-off. So this is what. And another thing, corrosive fluid. So corrosive fluid also, if this is corrosive fluid, I can take a very good decision. You know why? Corrosive fluid, when you see fluid is corrosive, it is always better to send it in the tube side. Always. Why? If I want to send it to the tube side, I need to have only the costlier material of the tube. Clear? But if I send the corrosive fluid in the shell side, my shell has to be costlier fluid and my tube also to be costlier fluid. So remember, when you see a highly corrosive fluid, it is recommended always they will put it in the shell side. Otherwise, if you put, tube side. Otherwise, if you put corrosive fluid in the shell side, the shell has to have a costlier MOC. Tube also have to have a costlier MOC. Clear? So remember, this is always good. You don't need to do much discussion. The discussion generally will happen on the viscous, dirty, and high pressure. So sometimes this is how you do trade-off. High viscous fluid, dirty fluid, and pressure. Sometimes these will be contradicting. There you need to have a discussion with tech center and MANREP and try to finalize. But corrosiveness, you don't need to do it. It's straightforward. Put it in the tube side. Wow, I love this topic a lot. Time. Yeah. So engineers' decision. We are the process engineers who are going to design this. Our ultimate aim is to reduce the cost. Okay, the exchanger cost, the initial, there are two types of costs, right? One is your initial cost and one is your operating cost. Initial cost is the cost that you go and you purchase, that is the initial cost. What is operational cost? The maintenance and repair cost. Okay, so you need to optimize, the good designer need to optimize both of that. First and foremost thing, safety, that you cannot, there is no trade-off in that. Safety you cannot trade off. So remember, when you size an exchanger, the flow-induced vibration should avoid it. Should avoid. At any cost, you need to avoid it. That is why these tools are very essential. HTRI and EDR. Our tools are essential. Only those tools can tell you where you have this flow-induced vibration and acoustic vibration. So these are two types of vibration that can destroy your exchanger, damage your exchanger. So the safety is important. There is no trade-off. Mainly the exchangers, people will make mistake in selecting the right type of exchanger. As I said, if you choose the wrong type of baffles, exchanger size will become big. If you choose the wrong type of pitch, exchanger size will become big. If you choose fluid allocation wrongly, your operating cost will increase. Okay, so you need to know, again, if you want to change your, if you want, instead of AEM, selecting the exchanger based on TMA standard, if you select it wrongly, operational cost will increase, right? Because sometimes, as I said, you need to remove inlet and outlet flange, so it will take long time. So shutting down a plant every minute will cost you a lot of money. So in that case, I want to remove my inlet flange, outlet flange, then pull out my exchanger. It is going to add a lot of time, so a lot of production cost. So again, you need to know when you design it, you need to do some trade-off. So we have to optimize it and design it. So that is the most important thing. And a very good engineer, remember, should judicially use the allowable pressure drop. The allowable pressure drop, exchanger, when you do a simulation, you will know this exchanger have allowable pressure drop of 0.5 bar. Try to use at least 0.45 bar from that exchanger. If you have 0.2 bar, at least use 0.118 bar. Use majority of your pressure drop and design your exchanger. Because more the pressure drop, more the heat transfer coefficient, and lesser the size of a heat exchanger. Okay, as I said, the design should be safe against the failure due to tube flow-induced vibration. This is mandatory, no trade-off. Design should have good flow pattern in the shell and stream analysis, adequate velocities in the both shell and tube. You need to have adequate velocities to have proper heat transfer coefficient. Now we are going to go some calculations, very simple calculations. The basic correlation is duty of an exchanger. The duty of an exchanger, there are two things. Duty of the cold fluid is equal to the duty of the hot fluid. Remember, duty of the cold fluid is equal to the duty of the hot fluid, and which will be equal to the duty of the exchanger. So all these three is equal. This is called energy balance. So energy balance is your hot fluid duty should be equal to the cold fluid duty. To give these both duty, you need to have an exchanger is in between. Okay. So the duty of the exchanger will also be same. So the duty of the exchanger, how do we name it? UAMTD or UALMTD. Now LMTD, we are going to discuss what is LMTD. Okay, this is parallel flow and counter current flow. Sometimes they call co-current or a parallel flow, both are same, and one is counter current. So LMTD you might have learned in your colleges, but I'm going to revise you, make it very simple. So when you have a parallel flow, inlet and outlet, you have an inlet, the high temperature, the hot fluid temperature will be very high, and slowly it will come out. And the inlet, because this is parallel flow, right? This is parallel flow. The cold fluid temperature will be very low, and slowly it will go up. So this is how your graph, you will get a graph in your parallel flow exchanger, right? Parallel flow, the cold fluid and the hot fluid. So this is how the parallel flow. So whenever you do an LMTD, I recommend you to do this graph first. Once you do the graph, the LMTD can be made very simple. Then counter current. Counter current in exchanger, generally, in shell and tube exchangers, you will always see counter current. Because driving force for the counter current is always better. You can have a temperature cross. So the counter current is more preferred in shell and tube heat exchangers. So what happens here? The inlet temperature from here slowly comes down. The cold fluid is a counter current. See, counter current. The hot fluid this direction, fluid is the cold fluid is opposite direction. So you have a curve goes like this. So here there is something called temperature cross is there. That is why I want to show here temperature cross. That means the cold fluid outlet temperature is little bit more than the hot fluid outlet temperature. So this is called temperature cross. So temperature cross, if it is available in heat exchanger, you need to go for a co-current, counter current exchanger. So counter current exchangers, whenever you see a temperature cross, you need to go for a counter current. Again, in advanced, I don't want to confuse you. This is the basis. We will decide how many shells in series. Okay, I don't want to confuse for time being. You will understand later. So whenever you see a counter current, the first preference is go for a whenever you see a cross temperature cross, go for a counter current exchanger. So once you know this graph, you have to calculate the LMTD. LMTD, you take the difference. Simple. Inlet and out. The inlet here, this cold stream inlet. So difference between this and difference between this, you take it. So here, in hot fluid inlet minus cold fluid inlet minus outlet, hot fluid outlet minus cold fluid outlet divided by ln of this. This is different from counter current. Counter current, the formula is different. That is why I said when you see a co-current or a counter current, put a graph. Once you put the graph, it is very simple because you need to know the difference, delta T, in and out. So here, temperature in minus temperature out, cold fluid temperature out, minus hot fluid temperature out minus cold fluid temperature in, divided by ln of same thing, temperature, hot fluid temperature in minus cold fluid temperature out, divided by hot fluid temperature out minus cold fluid temperature in. So ultimately, once you know the graph, take the difference of this. Difference of this and difference of this. Same thing here. Here what see? Here hot fluid inlet minus cold fluid inlet minus hot fluid outlet minus cold fluid outlet. Same thing divided by ln. Inlet outlet. So that is, it's always prefer when you have when you draw it and you can easily do it. Now comes, this is what you learned in engineering. Now practically, is it possible to have a true counter current and co-current or a parallel operation in your exchangers? To be very frank, no, it is not possible. Where it is possible, if you have a single, this is called as double tube exchanger. When you have a double tube exchanger, it is possible. Or you need to have a special F-type exchanger, also to some extent possible. But practically, your exchangers, it is not possible to have a pure counter current and pure co-current. So I have taken this because you have already learned it. I know you have learned this, but I want to tell you, in practically that is not possible. So that is why we are adding this a term called as correction factor. Why correction factor? Here, if you see this particular exchanger, okay, this is called as pass partition. You can see my mouse, right? This is called as pass partition. The fluid, hot fluid, the tube fluid, I'm going to send it in the tubes. The tube fluid will go through this 1, 2, 3, 4 tubes. Then it will go through this another 4 tubes. So this is called as 2-pass exchanger. 2-pass. And if you see the shell, from the shell it goes like this, it goes like this and comes out. Now, when it goes like this, it is parallel. When at the same time, when the shell side comes here, it is counter current. So what happens? This part co-current, this part counter current. This part co-current, this part counter current. This part co-current, this part counter current. This part co-current, this is part counter current. So generally, this is what happens in This is what happens in an exchanger. So that is why we have this something called FT, correction factor chart. This is available. So based on number of shells, number of passes in your shells, number of passes in your tubes, you have various correction factors. Okay, I don't want to put confuse you with a lot of formulas. There are graphs are available. Okay, you can get these graphs in your Perry, or you can get it in Kern, or you can get it in gas processing handbook. One of the best handbook. Once you become a process engineer, try to get this book, gas handbook. You get all type of charts, empirical charts, everything is available. Do that. So this is how the correction factor is. We do it. So you find out R and S. Based on R and S, you get the correction factor, and this correction factor has to be multiplied by the LMTD. This is what, then you get the mean temperature difference. Remember, this is very critical. Otherwise, your answers are wrong. In a practical, that is why in a practical, in a real life, the co-current and counter-current generally exist in a simple double pipe exchanger or F-type, to some extent F-type. Other than that, I don't see it is anywhere it is possible. So you need to add this correction factor. That is why the tools like HTRI or EDR, all these things are inbuilt. They will do it by itself. Now let us do some calculation. I have been giving a lot of theory, right? Now let us do some small calculations. Remember, always rule of thumb, not rule of thumb. It is fact. The hot duty, the hot side duty should be equal to the cold side duty. So let us do a small calculation. I'm going to give you a real life example only. So this is an example heat exchanger. We are going to size this exchanger. So make a note of it, of this problem. And slowly on each phase, we will see how we are going to size this exchanger. So please take the flow rate. The flow rate is 112,000 kg per hour. You convert into seconds. You have the calculators, right? So I want you to find out the hot stream duty, and I want to find out the cold stream duty. Can anyone tell me? Here the formula is MCP delta T. The LMTD will be used only in the exchanger. Remember, the duty of exchanger. Whenever you see the duty of exchanger only, you will see the UA LMTD. So whenever you see the hot side and cold fluid, it is simple formula MCP delta T, right? So can anyone do it and tell me what is the heat duty? Don't take it by kg per hour. It will not match. You need to take kg per second, unit conversion. M CP delta T. Very simple. Anyone? Anyone? You can unmute and talk.
Anup, there is one answer coming in already.
Okay.
I will read out that answer is from student Ratnesh Tiwari, who is saying 1788.
Correct. Okay. So this is very so the hot fluid and the cold fluid both will be same. This is what I just want to give an example, real life example. Just see the problem. Both will be same. This is called as energy balance.
Yeah, Prajakta, student Prajakta has raised her hand. Prajakta, you want to say something, Prajakta?
No, sir, nothing.
Be equal to the cold fluid duty. So once you know, remember this is the fundamental thing. Hot side duty should be equal to the cold side duty. MCP delta T of the hot side equal to the MCP delta T of cold side. Equal, cannot be different. Exactly should match. Now, data required for thermal design. What are the data required? First, you should know the duty, fundamental thing. Without that, you cannot design it, right? Then you need to know, for duty, you need to know the flow rates, temperature. So you need to get the conditions, densities, allowable pressure drop. When you do the Aspen modeling, you will know this is a fundamental thing, allowable pressure drop. You will know what is the pressure drop across the exchangers, your pumps, everything you will know. viscosity, thermal conductivity, specific heat. So these are the information you need for thermal design. Weight fraction, molecular weight, fouling resistance. Very, very important. Very, 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 very important. Fouling resistance, design pressure. Now you need to know whether it is fixed tube sheet, floating head, or U-tube. How do you know? I have given you some ideas, right? When there is a temperature difference is more than 93, I cannot go for fixed tube. If I have a high fouling fluid in the shell side, I cannot go for fixed tube. Clear? So if I have a very high corrosive fluid, very high fouling fluid, I cannot use in the tube side. I cannot use U-tube. U-tube cannot be used. U-bend exchangers cannot be used when there is high fouling liquid in the tube side, right? Then, so based on that, you will decide whether you will decide to go for a floating edge. Floating edge, anything is possible. Everything is okay. Cleaning in the tube side, shell side, everything is possible, but it is very costly. Again, based on the, if it is very highly toxic, you don't afford any leaking, then you have to go for S, or you can go for W or P. So these are all the fundamental things you will know based on, this is required. Until then, you cannot size it. Now we are going to discuss about fouling. Fouling, very, 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 very important. The material deposited that reduce the effective heat transfer due to the relatively low thermal conductivity. That means in your shower is a good example. When you have a salt water, you will see the deposit on your shower, right? So this is called as fouling. So what happens when there is a fouling is happening? It will, those deposit reduce the effective transfer rate across this heat exchangers, and the heat exchanger duty will come down. So deposition of unwanted materials in the heat transfer surface in your tubes or in your shells, so that can reduce the related, and those things have very low thermal conductivity. Since they have very low thermal conductivity, your heat transfer will come down, and exchanger performance will go down eventually. So what is the cost of fouling? So generally, the increased capital cost due to larger equipment. So you can ask, why larger equipment? Yes, that is why I'm telling you. So normally, hypothetically, I'm just going to tell you, kilowatt, 10 kilowatt exchange. I need, based on my process requirement, I need only 10 kilowatt exchanger. But you know that in course of 1 year, you may have some fouling, and because of fouling, you may need, you may lose a lot of areas, right? You may lose some area. So generally what you do, okay, I have fouling. So you collect the fouling data. I will tell you how to get it. So you collect the fouling data, then eventually you will size a bigger exchanger. Okay, instead of 10 kilowatt, you may size it for a 12 kilowatt. Your process requirement is 10 kilowatt only, but because of fouling, you are selecting as a 12 kilowatt bigger area exchanger. You know why? Because slowly it will come down. Then after 1 year, it will become 10. So before 1 year, I will take the exchanger and clean it and again bring it back. Right? So this is one of the important things. When you have fouling, you may have to increase the capital cost because of the larger equipment. You need to go for a larger equipment because you have to compensate that area, right? Now, another problem with the fouling, additional energy required due to increase in pumping, because when there is a fouling, you will have pressure drop. When there is more pressure drop, as I said in the beginning, one of the signs, there is a problem sign is your pumping, the power of the pump will go up, right? Then maintenance, biggest headache, when you clean, take it out, pull it, chemical clean it, you need to do a lot of maintenance cost. Downtime cost, very important. Sometimes the cleaning will take 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, depends on the amount of fouling. See, this is one, I want to show you how the fouling is. The clean tubes, see the fouling. This is the real-time pictures, friends. Just want to give you the feel, how the fouling is happening. See the bundle, exchanger bundle, how it has been fouled. It's a nightmare. Exchanger will lose its efficiency drastically. So that is why I need to go for a bigger massive exchangers sometimes if I have a lot of fouling. See the tubes, right? How much it is plugged. This is how you do hydrojetting. You clean the tubes. This is how you clean it. So this is the tube. You clean it, becomes very good. Now there are too much theories are there. Just want to go because time is very limited. I want to go a little bit fast. Particulate fouling, biolic fouling, corrosion that can be on fouling, choking, coking, chemical reaction fouling. There are many fouling mechanisms are there. Particulate fouling is if you have a small particulate in your stream, those suspended solid particle will stick and slowly it will attach to your surface and it will cause some small fouling. So particulate fouling, biological fouling, organic bacteria or fungus that gives some biological fouling. Then corrosion fouling. So what happens? The material itself, it corrodes and it forms a small layer over the exchanger. So this is called as corrosion type of fouling. Precipitation, again, precipitation is you have some dissolved solids. When there is high temperature, this dissolved solids will precipitate, right? Like your salts. So this is a type of corrosion. Chemical reaction fouling. This is another thing when there is, because of high temperature, there is a chemical is reacting and to form a chemical on the surface, it will form another layer. So this is type of chemical reaction fouling. So these are all different types of fouling. This is coking. Coking very high in a refineries. This is common actually because of high temperature. You need to exchangers. They tend to have some coke material formed on your exchangers. So this type of exchangers fouling is also there. So the fundamental thing, what is causing the fouling is nature of the fluid. Nature of the fluid, what type of fluid you're using, that is the major cause of fouling. Major cause. Then the contributing cause of velocity. This is where I said in the beginning, liquid you need to have 3 to 5 feet per second. All these things comes because of this. When you have low velocity, you generally have more corrosion. More fouling. When you have high velocity, it will minimize some fouling. Okay. Wall temperatures, again, these are all affected of the fouling. Tube materials, selection of tube materials, because some tube materials, as I said, it will react with your fluid and it can cause a fouling, reactive type of fouling. So selection of tube materials. So this is how generally fouling built up. A linear, I think I'm leaving out of time now. So falling rate and asymptomatic. Generally, it is most of the common type is linear. So if you leave it, in course of time, the fouling layer will increase and eventually you will lose your exchanger. So this is a real-time example for a cooling water. Velocity, when you reduce the velocity inside your exchanger, the fouling is keep on increasing. At the same time, when you increase the velocity, more and more velocity, if you see, the fouling is not increasing, right? So this is the impact of fouling in the cooling water. So that is why we have this velocity guidelines and all these things are there in place. So this is a common fouling resistance. This is common, but again, the right people to get this fouling resistance is from the technology people, because these fouling resistance are calculated. It has been experimentally found out. So technology people, when you design a heat exchanger for a particular technology, the technology people will give you the fouling resistance. Make a note of it. If they are not giving it, you can take this general. Okay, this is been calculated, but generally, when you design a plant, a heat exchanger, the technology people, because based on their experience, based on their, because this is all measured. Okay, this is not calculated. This has been measured and found out. For the technology, as I said, there could be many reasons: type of fluid, your tube material, your temperature. So based on all these things, this fouling resistance they will give you. If they are not giving it, this is standard. You can take this. So there will not be much difference. Sometimes the technologies will give more stringent than this. So that is why they have given the values. It can range from 0.003 to 0.001 meter square centigrade per watt. Okay. So remember, anything more than 0.0004 it is considered to be a dirty fluid. This is again not a standard, this is a recommendation. So you have to consider, so people say what is dirty? When you see dirty, that means your fouling resistance is more than 0.0004. Okay. So this is the overall values. If the licensor are not giving, you can take these values. Doesn't change much. Okay. Now, the material of construction, shell and tube, you need to know what type of. So these are all the required information, and designing the longer tubes will have a initial. Designing with the longer tubes lower the initial cost. Why? Longer the tube, lesser the diameter. Longer the tube, lesser the diameter. But the problem, longer the tube, more the pressure. So you need to do some trade-off. Okay, available pressure, check it out, and based on that, you need to decide. Sometimes the layout. If the layout is a constraint, you cannot go more. Very important thing. Very, very important thing. As I said, HTRI is one of the finest tool for designing an exchanger. I'm just putting this because you need to know, as engineers, you need to get some feel what HTRI does it. There is something, a new software called in Aspen, it is called EDR, Exchanger Design and Rating. So this is a new tool, but EDR is far, far inferior to HTRI. HTRI is still not India, all over the world, it is leading. HTRI is the leading heat exchanger design tool. So there are two types of tools are there, thermal design and mechanical design. Thermal design, process engineers will do. Mechanical design, they will be using PV Elite. Elite is a mechanical design software. We don't use it. Okay. So we do the thermal design. Only once we do the thermal design, we will give it to the mechanical engineers. They will be doing the PV Elites. They will use the PV Elite is one of the software. They will generate the mechanical design. Now what HTRI does it? HTRI does it three mode of calculation. EDR, Exchanger Design and Rating, Aspen. This is given by Aspen. Aspen also does the same thing. Rating, design and simulation. These three, both HTRI or Aspen, both does it. So what rating mode does it? Okay, rating mode is to check the over design. As I said earlier, every exchanger will have some over design factor inbuilt. Why the over design factor is inbuilt? Because of this fouling, I need to have some over design factor is inbuilt. So, pardon? As I said, there is always some over design inbuilt in each exchanger based on the fouling. So the rating mode is generally a process engineer working in a running plan, or a production engineer. When you are working in a running plan, you do this rating mode. What do you do? The exchanger geometry is fixed because everything is fixed, right? Geometry is fixed, and the condition you see from the DCS, distributed control system. What is my hot temperature, inlet temperature? 100 degrees. Outlet temperature 75. Cold inlet temperature 70 to 40. Outlet temperature 70. You know everything. All the right condition, you put it and you will see the over design. It will give you the over design. Okay, then you slowly check it. Okay, after 2 months or after 6 months, initially the over design is 110. Then you will see over design has become 108. Then after 6 months or 1 year, it has become 105. Then you see you plot a curve. Oh my God, if this continues, in next 1 year, your exchanger will be fouled. Okay, before that, you need to do some maintenance. You need to clean it, take it out and clean it. So all these things, this is what rating mode. Rating mode means everything is fixed. Your design geometry is fixed. Your inlet and outlet conditions are fixed. And you see the over design. Clear? Now the simulation. Simulation means, okay, I have an exchanger. Okay, and I'm going to use this exchanger for some other purpose. So I know the inlet. If I know the inlet, I don't know the outlet condition. So the geometry is fixed. Okay, you are saying that this exchanger is available. Now, can I use this exchanger for some other plans? So the geometry is fixed and you are using it to find out, okay, with this geometry, I'm going to give this temperature. What will be my outlet temperature of the hot fluid and what will be the outlet temperature of the cold fluid? Okay. Sometimes I want to do debottlenecking. I want to increase my capacity of my plant. Then your geometry is fixed. the flow rate is increased. The temperature, the flow rate is increased. Definitely, the outlet temperature may not be same as your original temperature. So you have to do a simulation. So this is how the simulation mode work. So geometry is fixed. You are simulating it. What will be my new operating conditions? So clear? This is what simulation. So simulation means geometry is fixed. You are simulating the new operating conditions. In the rating mode means geometry is fixed. Your operating conditions are fixed. You have to check the over design, how the performance of a heat exchanger. Now comes the third mode is designing. Designing means nothing is fixed. Only your operating conditions. You know the operating conditions. Based on these operating conditions, I need to design this heat exchanger. Okay, this is how you do it. Now I want to use the same example to design an heat exchanger. So first and foremost thing, we use HTRI or EDR to run it. The first is assumption of U. Okay. When you use HTRI or EDR, it has inbuilt data to find out what is the available U. It will assume it. The first and foremost thing, all the software is it will assume the U. The second important thing, it will calculate the LMTD. It will calculate. Then then you have to give your OD. So this is where, as I said, my guidance was I was giving